Yeah, so thank you, Danny, for the intro. I see myself as an entrepreneur. I've been in biotech companies from the day I remember myself. I'm a biologist in training, comes from genetics, have business experience, including an MBA here from the Technion and part of the 8400 leading management group in life science in Israel. In addition to that, I've been spending some of my management time in high-tech companies, taking data and understanding their big data and algorithms. So now in MyBiotics, I'm trying to combine these experiences in order to reveal new drugs and approaches. As we discussed, some of my hobbies is to, I'm leading the medical troops in the southern part of Israel. And so this is a hobby, but I think this is my link to medicine. And I started the company because of a very personal reason. A very close relative got Parkinson, and I started reading, exploring, reading and thought it is linked. So I called my partner and I said, we're opening a company. We didn't want to start with Parkinson, it's too complicated. But ever since, we now see that it is linked. So we learned a lot, and I want to try during this presentation or an interview to show how important this set of bacteria and microorganisms are to our health. Thank you, Dan.
Great. So we'll start with a presentation. If anybody would have questions, you can feel free to ask, and we'll get to those later on. And I have some questions of my own, but let's start with your presentation of the company.
Okay, just give me a second.
And while you're getting this, oh, you got it. Okay.
Just want to make sure that you see it. I'm going to go to presentation mode and we'll start.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to try and convince you that there is a missing organ, something very important in your body that actually control a lot of the things that you think we may know about medicine. So thank you, Danny, for the introduction. I'll skip that. I'll start maybe with the short introduction about MyBiotics. So MyBiotics started 2014, the end of 2014. And since then, we've developed a very unique technological platform combining biological algorithms and software. We went through clinical stage with our first drug, just completing that a few weeks ago, phase 1, as I mentioned. During 2020 and 21, we established a few clinical programs in oncology, women's health, and probiotics, and established some collaboration, important collaboration with leading pharma, including in microbiome. And I think not less important, the investment that we had so far at $12 million, while in the past 2 years, we already have non-dilutive income from collaborations and grants of more than $4 million. So now I'm going to science a little bit because I think this is an essential part of understanding the microbiome. There was a huge project, the Human Genome Project. Everybody expected this project to solve all the medical problems in the world. But after a few years, it was clear that this is not the only thing. And a few years later, started the Human Microbiome Project by the NIH. And some of the very interesting part was the fact that there is 150 more exposed genes or active genes in the microbiome as a whole, with an effect on us as humans. So ever since then, we understand more and more about that. So a few words about the Human Microbiome Project. 250 healthy Americans were screened to see what are the microbes on their body, in the body, and so on. And as I mentioned, some amazing facts were revealed. I'll just give you a few, but 150 more genes, active genes controlling materials that control our behavior. For example, serotonin. We have 10 times more bacterial cells than our own. So we're practically 90% bacteria. And we all carry 2 kilograms of bacteria on and in our body, which we don't want to lose. So the concept of bad bacteria is good, but 99.9% of the bacteria that we carry are essential for us to be healthy and live. I think one of the nice examples that there are that animals like mice that don't have bacteria will not develop 20% of their mental or brain functionality. And then when getting these bacteria back, they will work again. So I think I hope I'm at the beginning of convincing you that there is something important in the microbiome. And then in parallel to these discoveries, a doctor in Australia got a patient with a disease called C. diff, Clostridium difficile. It's a very nasty bacteria that grow in the gut and can kill you. It creates a very significant diarrhea. And he used samples of microbiome, or, and again, my apologies for that, stool from a healthy donor or a healthy person with all the bacteria and all the healthy microbiome, and gave it to this patient, and magic happened. Within 24 hours, this patient went home completely healthy. This was a few years ago, and today, this practice is done tens of thousands of times in the US, and there are companies developing this as a drug. The practice of taking a microbiome from a healthy person to a sick person led to a very significant research processes. And since then, there are evidence, very strong evidence, that bacteria can create a significant medical improvement for medical indications such as Parkinson, which I mentioned, women's health, fertility, infection disease. There is a work in autism, which I think is fascinating, even skin health. So I think the immediate question will be, why can't we see products based on bacteria on the shelf today? And I think this is what we expected to happen. So taking stool from a healthy volunteer, it seems nasty, but effective, but still there are very significant safety issues. You can't scale it up. No one can grow the microbiome in scale. There is high cost because of safety screening and a lot of other complications, even IP and regulation. Here comes MyBiotics and our approach, and it connects to how can we link between this amazing field, the ability of these bacteria to cure us and keep us healthy, and the fact that we need remedy or drugs for patients, the bedside. As I mentioned, currently no one in the world, as far as we know, can't grow these bacteria. The maximum that we are aware of is the ability to grow 20% of the human microbiome potential, losing most of the genomic and metabolomic effect and the ability to cure or prevent problems. So now we go to MyBiotics. I'll show off for a second, but we are the first in the world that developed the first scalable microbiome process. We can actually take a healthy volunteer microbiome sample and grow it in scale. And instead of treating few people, we can treat hundreds of people using the same composition of bacteria. We just completed the successful phase 1, meaning we showed that this treatment is safe. And I'll show you later how it opens a lot of additional opportunities for MyBiotics, and actually going back, to the ability to approach new medical indication in addition to C. diff that I mentioned. Then if there are any questions while I'm talking, please stop me. So I'll spend a minute on talking about this super donor technology, the culturing technology. We start with selecting a donor. Selecting a donor for fecal transplantation or for microbiome use is very, very complicated. We want to make sure that this donor is healthy, he doesn't carry any problems, history, medical history, and so on and so forth. And just to give you an example, there was an active bank of such samples to treat people in the US, a nonprofit bank that was shut down because of COVID, because of the cost of screening donors. So after we screened and we have a donor, we go and produce pharma grade. It sounds like a trivial thing, but to grow bacteria coming from a human sample in GMP production capabilities under drug regulation is very challenging. So this is the next step. After that, we go to a dried powder and eventually get a product which is a pill containing a powder representing the microbiome rather than have a stool in a capsule. I know that it sounds strange, but even now, while we speak, in centers in the US and in Israel, people are receiving stool frozen pills in cases where they were near dead condition. So this is a very serious problem, and this is the only and most efficient drug. I want to show you just for a second what happens in the market. So as I mentioned that this treatment is done under regulation in hospitals, but there are some leading companies doing pharmaceutical-based fecal transplantation, or FMT. They take samples from donors, put them in capsules, and treat people. Some of these processes completed phase 3 and are on their way to be released as a drug under FDA regulation. These companies can treat 5 to 10 patients using one sample from a donor. We, on the other hand, can treat hundreds of people using one donation. Think about the fact that people will get only 5 people will get the same composition. In our case, we can treat hundreds with a very controlled microbiome composition, which we screened for various elements and made sure that this is safe, much safer than using a human sample. And now when we want to talk about mechanism, I know that it sounds very strange using human sample as a treatment. There are a lot of evidence doing that, or other things that are taking samples or tissues from healthy people and using them, but we refer to the microbiome as a mechanism to treat problems. And the mechanism that was identified is first bacterial diversity. We want to have a very healthy ecosystem. We're talking about hundreds of bacterial types in our body all the time, communicating and sending signals even to our brain and to our immune system. The second layer is the genome. We look at this pool of bacteria as a pool of genes. And these genes have a very unique activities, materials that they secrete, and some of them are directly related to some medical indications or problems. And the last thing is non-bacterial microorganisms that are also associated to this functionality. So when we develop our drug, we look at all of these parameters to make sure that the product that we have have all these characters and very effective. I'm going to take you just for a second to our first drug. Our first drug called MBX-SD202, and it was designed to replace the use of human sample or fecal transplantation as a drug. And the 202 is, as I mentioned, we're screening for healthy volunteers or healthy donors. We take the bacteria from them as a starting point, and we grow it in a very industrial process to a large scale and a big batch. And what you can see here on the right, you can see a dimensional looking at different people, microbiome of different people in different days, while you see our drug just in the middle, meaning this is the first time a human microbiome was industrially produced using a starting material from a human. And this is a significant achievement for the company, developing this concept to product approach and showing it in humans just recently. I think this is, if I try to stop for a second and summarize what I just said, I'm trying to show how important these bacteria are and how big is the gap between the potential and the ability to produce product because of the ability to grow them. And on the other hand, I wanted to show you that we've been able during the past 6 years to create the first alternative to stool or fecal transplantation drug. And just to make it something that is not strange or small activity, this is one of the fastest growing scientific areas today. And there is almost no pharma company that have activity around microbiome, including oncology, women's health, and so on. And companies that have FMT capabilities, stool sample drugs, are worth millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. So to summarize the activity around the 202 and the super donor technology, we showed in our phase 1 trial that it is safe, it is human-like microbiome and have all the characterization. It doesn't change the general health of these of healthy people. And the bottom line is that this drug, based on our technology, is safe for healthy people. Going to business and looking at how can we make it a drug? How can we go to market and create licensing and collaborations around this technology? So I mentioned the 202 for recurrent C. diff. This is the indication, medical indication that is treated now with antibiotics and fecal transplantation. We completed phase 1 in healthy volunteers, and we're proceeding towards phase 2 and phase 3 using the same technology, following interaction with the FDA. This indication or this platform, compared to fecal transplantation, can be expanded to additional medical indications based on the safety tests that we already did. So the first one will be going to areas where safety is a very important issue, like patients who suffer from C. diff when they go through oncology treatment. Other indications are related to using bacteria for ulcerative colitis, which is strongly related and showed the link between microbiome or bacteria to curing this disease. And also other indications such as atopic dermatitis, which is associated or if affected by the immune system. There was a trial showing that fecal transplantation just recently, a few weeks ago, completely improves the skin problem of atopic dermatitis when using fecal transplantation as a treatment. Let's look at companies and have some benchmark of other companies in the area. So we look at Finch Therapeutics, taking stool sample from healthy volunteers, putting it in a pill and using it as a treatment. They're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Seres Therapeutics reached already $2.3 billion, and they're using a human-derived sample as well, with a different technology where they eliminate 80% of the bacteria that don't create spores. They are very progressed, doing great things, and they're helping the microbiome field by showing that microbiome actually have a role in our health. MyBiotics is a very interesting story because MyBiotics is one of the leading company in terms of clinical evidence. They completed phase 3 for their first drug based on fecal transplantation. This company was acquired by a pharmaceutical company, by Ferring Pharmaceutical. And the first deal that they did in microbiome was with MyBiotics. And I'm going to show you this. And I think this is a very strong validation to what we do. Other companies like MAT Pharma that are working in oncology, which is a fascinating area, and even Antibiotics that do donor bank in order to restore microbiome and bacterial functionality for people who lose this functionality. I'll stop here for a second and I'll give you some rest from stool and fecal transplantation. I think it's more than enough for people in the morning. And let's talk about using single bacteria or clusters of bacteria in the concept that is more familiar, like probiotics. In probiotics, we know that single bacteria can have some positive effect on our health. But single bacteria or specific bacteria can create much more than that, like treating obesity, treating infertility, and so on. But there are very big problems there as well. It's very hard to culture most of these bacteria and make them survive. And then when we grow them in industrial process, it's very hard to deliver them because they'll die in the stomach, they'll die during the process of production, and so on. And the last thing is, how can we translate the fecal transplantation results into products? So when we look wide, 40,000 feet high on MyBiotics, MyBiotics established a technological platform dealing with single strain culture, clusters of bacteria, and whole microbiome, or everything. And we do it in a very unique way that allow our bacteria to not only grow, but also survive the body condition and colonize and have their effect. And it was proven in animal models and in the lab. In addition to that, we have a very unique delivery processes that opens ability to use different bacteria in very challenging product types, like such that involve heat or compression. And the most interesting thing that we've developed in the past 2 years is a computational platform closely or very tightly linked to our biological process that allow us to understand the dynamics inside this very complex population. And this allows us to design treatments based on this understanding. For example, how can we prevent problems associated to drugs that interacts with the microbiome, because we can understand and see what happens there in our labs immediately. This platform generated a few clinical programs. One is around the GI, gastrointestinal and metabolic diseases. The second is oncology, fascinating area with very strong evidence. Women's health, which we see as a strategic area. And on the side, we have a very separate activity around next generation probiotics, funded by the Horizon 2020 European Union grant. It's a very distinguished grant of $2.3 million, which we received for this activity. So from these programs, the pipeline was generated with very strong partners. And I just wanted to stop for a second and take a look at what happened in the past 2 years. During the corona, we estimated that it's going to be a challenging time, and we wanted to make sure that we can validate the need and translate the technology concept into deals and collaboration, because it was very important to make sure that we are not dreaming and people are willing to pay and work with us on that. So during the corona, we got this grant for the probiotics. We collaborated with Galmed on NASH, or non-alcoholic liver problem, on identifying biomarkers using our computational platform. We started collaboration, including an investment from leading dermatology company in Japan. We are developing a product for women health with Ferring Pharmaceutical and MyBiotics, collaborating with leading medical center. Hadassah is one of them, but others on women health and oncology, and also completed our phase 1 and discussing the options to expand and license this technology with other companies. I'm going to talk a little bit about other programs. Let's take a look at other microbiome. I was talking about mostly the bacteria in our gut, but there are bacteria on our skin, in our eyes, vaginal microbiome, mouth microbiome, and they have very significant effect on health. Vaginal microbiome or bacteria associated to infections, but also to fertility, such as IVF and other indications. And we've developed a concept around a set of bacteria, 4 bacteria, that were selected according to their interactions. We grew them with our technology and showed that it is stable, more efficient, and we're now developing with Ferring and MyBiotics the first drug based on our technology for bacterial vaginosis. It's a huge market, but it also opens additional indications in women health, which is one of the strongest areas associated to the microbiome, including very unique mechanisms that are associated to these bacteria. So to look at that, it was a very important step for MyBiotics, working with one of the leading women health companies, pharmaceutical companies, Ferring, with this arm of Biotics, leading company in microbiome, with the first drug towards clinical trials in women health. A few words about the oncology program. I'm thinking whether I should give you an example or talk directly about what we do, but I think maybe I'll start with an interesting fact. We all heard about checkpoint inhibitors and biological drugs for melanoma. These drugs have an amazing effect on 30% of the patients. 70% will not react completely. There are non-responders. There are evidence and trials showing that if you take bacteria from responders to checkpoint inhibitors and give them to non-responders, a significant portion of these non-responders will respond to the treatment, meaning we can expand the response rate of these amazing drugs just by replacing the bacteria. So this is the core of our collaboration with two hospitals, but we look at the oncology field in other aspects, side effects associated to treatments, and also infections, as I mentioned before, like the C. difficile for people who go through bone marrow transplantation. Going to the probiotics, and this represents a potential business model for MyBiotics. When we look at the microbiome and the activities that we have, we can take some of these activities, build them as a spin-off activity, a unique area, and spin them off or create a specific business unit. So looking at the probiotics rather than the pharmaceutical pathway of the microbiome, probiotics is a fast-growing area, amazing evidence, but still this is a it's a different approach, it's different scale, it's different pressure on price. And since we have understanding of the bacteria that are not in the probiotics, and we can actually bring specific materials that can help and support good bacteria and design them using our computational platform. And since we already developed a significant product pipeline based on probiotics, we've built a group in MyBiotics that are building probiotics and not pharma. Different regulation, different activity based on additional aspects. And this is ready for spin-off. So we see this happening in other companies, but since customers and people are looking for personalized approach to what they do, even in cases where they get medical treatment, our ability to take the probiotic approach and spin it off to create income fast in a year or two is very, very important for a company like MyBiotics, while keeping the focus on the pharmaceutical pathway with the technological edge. Few words about the team. First of all, we're located in Israel, as Danny mentioned, close to the Weizmann Institute in the Science Park. We have a team of scientists coming from biology, computational science, bioinformatics, but we have a strong business side as well and clinical side as well. In our board, I can mention Yoshinori Oikawa, who is is the chairman of MyBiotics. He was part of SodaStream, Given Imaging, who was sold to Medtronic. He represented Teva in APAC. We have David Baram, my partner. We started the company together. He just sold his company, a CRISPR company, in hundreds of millions of dollars deal. Mr. Yamada, who is funded a pharmaceutical company, Angus, and is one of our biggest investors. Of course, Chaim Horvitz, who is very known for his activity in Teva, the son of Eli Horowitz, who established Teva, and Eran Perry, who is also a very active member in this pharma area and also part of an investment arm of Marucho. Looking at the advisory team, and these are people that we can call anytime. They're working with us very, very close. We have people who are leading player in the market, in the microbiome. Professor Ilan Jungster is a pioneer in microbiome. He did the first treatment using pills as part of his work in Harvard and the Boston Children's Hospital. He's leading the microbiome research in one of the biggest centers here in Israel. Professor Omri Koren, who was part of the NIH project, and he's leading the microbiome research in Bar Ilan University Medical School. I can go through all of them, but I think good examples are also Susan Pittman, who led the oncology in Pfizer and is part of the advisory team for our oncology group. Christian, who was head of M&A in Novozyme, one of the biggest probiotic companies, is working with us for the past 6 years. And other very important people as part of our advisory. What I'm trying to say is that we've created a platform, including the IP, where when we design a technology or a product, we work with very strong people who bring the need in the market, the medical view, the business view, and the scientific view in order to go into a viable product with the potential to have a significant clinical effect. Sorry. And now, going back to the slide, and I'm summarizing to leave time for question.
Yeah, and
going back to the...
I'll just say we have lots of questions I'm getting from different directions, so we will address them very shortly.
Yeah, okay, great. So, but I wanted to go for a second back to the slide that I showed you, that in order to treat and show clinical efficacy in these huge markets, infection disease, oncology, Parkinson, and so on, instead of using fecal transplantation and frozen samples of stool, we can actually now, first time in the microbiome area, use a drug. We can use a pill with a white dried powder representing the human microbiome. And I think this is a very significant breakthrough and a huge opportunity to move forward. I'll stop here. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm open to any question.
Thank you, Didi. So if you can get out of the sharing screen so
sure.
I could see you. So lots of questions. So someone is asking, why is Big Pharma not using this technology?
So Big Pharma, since this is a very young area, microbiome is very young. It's been active in the past 6-7 years. Big Pharma are active in this area. Johnson & Johnson by Janssen are leading this microbiome in pharmaceuticals. They're working on oncology, on dermatology, investing in various companies. Takeda also very much involved in this area. Nestle Health, which is not a pharmaceutical company, but they're doing a lot of activity around medicine, invested most of the money in Ceres. There is almost, by the way, Ferring, which acquired MyBiotics and invested in the activity with us, is a mid-sized global pharmaceutical company, a very established pharmaceutical company. But we all expect the first drugs to be released in the coming year. This will open additional activities, and most of the activity done with these companies was to identify specific bacteria or trying to solve this complex problem using fecal transplantation. This is the first time anyone can grow such a big and controlled community, and we do believe that this will open a lot of other activities. I can go name by name of the pharmaceutical companies, but I think almost all of them are involved in this stage or the other.
Is these stool pills, are these pills today that are being used FDA approved?
So it's not FDA approved. These treatments in clinics is done not under IND, but it is regulated. There are guidelines for using these pills to treat patients with C. diff, with this specific problem. Rebiotics and Ceres completed phase 3 successfully, meaning they're on their way under IND and under FDA regulation towards a released drug.
Next question. What is the regulatory route for these microbiome-based drugs?
So we're going through the route of a drug under IND, phase 1, phase 2, safety, efficacy, and the standard pathway of a drug. This is it.
Are there any plans to develop a drug that combats psoriasis? Would the product used for atopic dermatitis be usable in this treatment?
Yes, so as I mentioned, one of the areas that we explore with some of our partners is to use microbiome-related treatments to skin-associated problems like atopic dermatitis and other indications. And the concept around it is we want to change the way these bacteria interact with the immune system. And by that, reduce the autoimmune response, which was shown that by using fecal transplantation provides very good clinical evidence. So this approach is very viable, and we're now looking at partnership for atopic dermatitis for our technology, which already passed phase 1, and we can go directly into phase 2. For psoriasis, the treatment is in many cases local and a biological drug that have a long-term effect, which is not always positive. So by using this treatment, we believe that it can be a very good way to treat the base, the biological problem, and not the symptoms.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Another question is, do we need, oh, I lost your question, sorry, antibiotics prior to the usage of your products?
It's a very good question. For Clostridium difficile, for C. diff, the common practice or the process includes taking antibiotics. And by the way, this is one of the reasons why Clostridium difficile is a recurrency process. People take antibiotics. This bacteria is antibiotic resistance. It will come back. And then you need antibiotics again. And then it's a cycle, never-ending cycle. So in this case, our drug will be after taking antibiotics. It's eliminating the bad microbiome and repopulating with good bacteria. In other cases, we will probably use a long-term treatment in order to shift the microbiome towards a healthy microbiome if a change, an undesired change occurs, like in IBD or in other indications associated to microbiome.
Another question is, do you have any partners for non-clinical probiotics?
So we're discussing this at the moment. We're looking for a partner for the non-pharma activities. We're looking for a strategic partner to work with us with the probiotics to work commercialization with the personalization approach.
What would be the timeline for your pre-probiotic spin-off, and how does the technology differentiate itself from competitors?
So the timeline is actually we're looking for the right partner. The activity will look like that. We'll have half a year of investing in specific research here in MyBiotics in our computational and biological systems to identify specific components for personalization aspects. And following that, we believe that we can get to sales with the product within a year and a half.
And last, we have more. Okay, so probiotics have shown not to colonize the gut. Thus, why the use of a fecal transplant? Do you expect your pills to colonize the gut?
Yes, we expect, and we have some good evidence about that. When we tried our technology compared to fecal transplantation from the same source in animal models, we saw superior colonization for the same source with our technology. So this is one case. On the other hand, we do see survival and long-term survival of our product, so we expect better colonization. In addition to that, the mechanism which we use for our culturing enhance better colonization and adhesion to the GI mucosa.
Are there a finite number of good bacteria? Are they all known?
Sorry, Danny, are there?
Are there an infinite number of good bacteria? Are they all known, all the bacterias?
There is a lot of unknown around.
Yeah, sorry.
We basically don't know enough about the activity or the role of each bacteria in our gut. There are huge number of beneficial bacteria that we already understand the mechanism, but we still need to learn a lot more. The key element today and the most significant factor in getting clinical results is the diversity. A healthy population of bacteria and microorganisms that live together and communicate in order to create better balance in our gut, which affect the immune system, which affect our clinical health.
And just so I understand, again, you formed the company in 2014, and currently you are raising capital. How much will you be raising currently?
We're raising $15 million. This will be used to complete phase 2 and get efficacy results for our first drug, complete our GMP facility for producing the drug and producing additional drugs for clinical evidence, and getting ready with our drug with Ferring towards clinical trials. So 2 drugs in clinical trial, 1 facility for production. And and obviously, sorry, Danny, getting ready for IPO and pushing towards significant deals. I just mentioned that we did some important collaborations. We're now looking at getting much more and higher number deals based on this technology because it's much more established today.
And what would be the minimum investment?
I think we'll go with the $2 million in the minimum investment, but we're open for discussion. It depends, of course, who is the investor, maybe with a strategic or a synergistic value to the company. We will go with less or more. We're open.
And
we're actually, Danny, I think the most important for us is to look at the potential of MyBiotics and work with partners that can understand the dream and potential. If we look at a company from Israel, which a very established, unique technology, compared to the benchmark, which is hundreds of millions of dollars using fecal transplantation, we're looking for a partner that will understand that and help us access the American market and become leaders there as well.
Someone is asking how to connect to discuss partnership and or investments. We will be sending, by the way, this is recorded, and we will be sending an email with your contact info to everybody here, including those who couldn't make the call.
Thank you, Danny.
They don't know that they'll be getting it, but they will. Another Elia here is asking, please email me about probiotics non-clinical. We have a platform with users that record activity. Okay, you can see that, and you can also, you'll get the contact information. And maybe just another question, how did COVID-19, I mean, you spoke about it a little bit, but how did it affect the market in general?
Actually, we didn't expect it to have such a significant effect because you can screen that and you can make sure that you identify COVID, but there were evidence that COVID can exist in the microbiome, in the gut samples. And just a technical thing, until the COVID, people could go and do a donation, sorry, call it donation, it's stool sample for treating people, sending it from home and tested every 6 weeks. This was the process. Today, because of the COVID, tests should be done every time. And in order to clear and test the patient, we're talking about thousands of dollars of testing. So it became a very significant price for approval of each donor. And this is why these banks, the non-profitable or non-profit banks, stopped their activity. And it created a very significant value to what we do, because we do screen our donor much deeper than anyone else, but still have a very, very competitive cost of good because of the batch of the size of the batch, sorry.
So Scott thanks you for doing this important work and is asking what's the pre-money valuation?
I think this should be part of the discussion with the potential investors. If this is fine with you, we'll be very happy to meet and talk and go on the details.
And maybe last question I have is what's your vision, your dream for MyBiotics technology platform?
I have two visions. One is the personal one, and the second is my investors, which I have good investors' vision. One is and I'll start with the small one, which is also important. I want to make money and make sure that the company becomes a big, significant, leading pharmaceutical company in the microbiome area. And I have to say today, I believe we can, because of this important phase 1 result. What I really want to do, I want to see someone coming sick and going home feeling better. This is my goal. And this connects to why I started the company. It will be a dream to see someone getting a pill and becoming healthy again.
I'm trying to think if I had any other question for you. You mentioned your investors. What kind of investors supported the company so far? VCs, family offices, Israeli-based, global players?
So we have 2 Japanese partners. One is a small pharmaceutical company who invested in order to do collaboration with us. This was one of the investors. The second is Mr. Chaim Horvitz, who invested from his fund. He's a very experienced pharma manager, and he have a lot of contribution to the company. And another investor, the last investor that invested in a CLA is Marucho. Marucho is a pharmaceutical company with an investment arm. They are leading the skin care and dermatology in Japan, holding, I think, 40% of the market. So people who understand pharma and understand the market.
So Didi, this is those were the questions we had. We are reaching the hour of our session. Anything else you'd like to add?
First of all, thank you very much. I see that I don't see anyone, but I see that we have at least 35 people. So thank you for the time and for the question. We do look for partners also as investors, and partners that can go with us towards making a difference. And we really want to go to America and be a significant player in America, and looking for people who can understand the dream and understand the potential.
That's great. So again, everybody will be getting your information and a link to the recording of this session. That started with me crashing the system here, but that's why I'll remember you for many, many years. And so will my our guest here today. And maybe I'll just mention to you that we have exciting webinars coming. I don't like to call it webinars, really. It's online family office sessions coming up, which I'll describe in a second. For those of you who follow us, we have 3 conferences coming up in Canada: Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto, all in April 5th, 7th, and 12th. So a very we're very concentrated on that. We also on April 27th have our New York conference at the World Trade Center with amazing speakers from Silverstein to Purdue Chicken and Sheraton family and Bronfman and many others. So you should check that out as well. My next session is March 3rd with Sherry Pryor-Witter from the famous Witter family. And that's going to be this Thursday on March 3rd. And next week, by the way, Didi, I don't know if you collect art. If not, this is the time. I'll be speaking to one of Israel's most famous artists. His name is Yigal Ozeri. He's a very famous painter. He lives in New York. And I will be speaking with him on March 10th. So that's next Thursday. And Zach Williams, the son of the amazing actor Robin Williams, will be speaking with us about depression, about suicide, and about his startup that is dealing in that world. So he spoke at our Miami conference as well. So that's going to be a very interesting discussion that's going to happen on March 15th. So Didi, thank you very much. I hope to see you at our in-person meetings as well. And yeah,
thank you very much.
And where are you located in Israel?
Very close to Tel Aviv, in Rehovot. Very close to Weizmann Institute. Most of the people know that.
That's great. So thank you so much, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you very much for everybody. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.